talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast. So, we've been treated to some brand new Imagine Dragons music. And I know Imagine Dragons can be a divisive band for some people, but I'm in the camp with 60 million other people who love Imagine Dragons. So, 60 million people can't be wrong. Am I right, Peter?
The famous Bon Jovi quote that... How many million was it for Bon Jovi when they made that?
I think it was 30 million, I want to say.
Was it?
I'm sure it was, but it's hard to say because they had to do it via CDs, didn't they?
Yeah, they did do it via CDs. But that joke is a Bon Jovi thing because they actually made a compilation, didn't they? That was titled that.
Yeah,
However million people can't be wrong. I can't remember how many people it was, but now I feel like there's always so much more people because everything's so much more global. The numbers are all a lot bigger for these bigger bands.
Yeah, because they can just skew it for one passing listener and then have it in the number count, can't they? But like I say, Imagine Dragons are back and they've got a new song called Eyes Closed, which has a great music video and some very interesting things to sort of get into. But the other thing that's really cool with this song is in true Imagine Dragons fashion, it always gets you with a surprise. It has like staples of what you would expect from them, like it sounds very much like Believer in places with the way they emphasize the chorus, but also there's all this weird bass and drum production. You've got these like almost dubstep wubs and stuff that are coming in.
It's almost like there's like hip hop scratching. That's like the rhythmic side of it. It's like it's got like a so yeah, I suppose it's just really heavily shuffled, which obviously make it. You don't hear a lot of rock songs that are shuffled in that manner because it's definitely like they've definitely taken like a hip hop inspired approach, which I know they are like fans of that. But that's very clear on like the rhythm side of this.
Yeah, they sort of have a few different sounds to Imagine Dragons, and I feel like Eyes Closed sort of follows Believer. I'm trying to think of the songs that sound more like this on their debut album. They've sort of done this more recently because Believer, Cutthroat, Enemy all have this type of, like grooving, sort of rolling quality to them with then like a really harsh chorus intro that sort of like commands your attention, and they're really good at doing this type of sound. They've sort of, I don't want to say they've created this type of sound over the years, but they've definitely popularized this type of song in the charts.
I think they're definitely one of the leaders of whatever it is. I mean, I know they're just alt rock on paper, but this has got to have its own term really when it's so infused with like hip hop as well.
Yeah, and what's really cool with the Imagine Dragons track is the production, because there's so many little like vocal effects and things going on to accentuate the music. I just really like it. There's always a lot of ear candy in the Imagine Dragons songs that you can listen to it like for the first 5 times really before you've really taken in everything that's going on in the track. And I've often said with Imagine Dragons songs that it takes me a while to actually get to know them. Like sometimes I'll be like shell shocked on the first listen, like what was that? And it takes a while to actually, get into it. And by that I mean like, the first listen you're like, ooh, that's interesting. And then by the 5th listen, you're singing along because you know all the words.
There was definitely a couple of songs on Mercury Act 1 and 2 that I found that on. Particularly Blair. Like Blair, the first time I listened to that, I was like, what the hell is this? And then like a couple of listens in, you're like bopping your head and you know all the words. And it changes it for you slightly. But I think that's good in itself because it's sort of... I think when you do that with some of the artists, particularly if there's an artist you really like and they go in either a different direction or they're quite experimental and you just, listen to the full album and you're not just listening to the hits. If you've got songs where you don't really like them that much or they don't immediately capture you on the first listen, but then they're growing you and you start to like them, that's quite good for like expanding your palette in a way.
Yeah, and I do think that when you've got a band that's as genre diverse, I feel like it's fair, as Imagine Dragons, it actually opened you up to a lot of different styles that you may not like. You can go as a fan, you can dive into Evolve and go, okay, this has got like that sort of arena pop rock sort of energy with sing-along choruses, and a little bit of weirdness in places, but for a lot of Evolve is very like cut and dry. Apart from the singles, like you've got Believer and you've got Thunder that are very Imagine Dragonsy. Do you know what I mean? Like that's their sort of style. But the rest of the album, like Whatever It Takes included, I know Whatever It Takes has got some very, very fast sort of rapped vocals in as well, which is like a flex from Dan Reynolds, isn't it? But yeah, a lot of the B-sides on that album, songs like Start Over, Rise Up, and I'll Make It Up to You, are very cool, like just like rock songs or you know, like arena songs that you don't feel like you hear many people doing. And I always feel like it's a shame with some of the bands, because Evolve is a really, really feel-good album when you're listening to like those 7 songs that aren't singles, minus Yesterday, obviously, because that song for me doesn't seem to fit the rest of the brief of the album. It seems to really stick out.
It's a little bit off one end of it, I think. But like you say, Evolve, I feel like it's an album where I think the main criticism for Evolve is that it's safe. But you go, is it safe? Nobody makes that album. Nobody.
Yeah, you sort of. A lot of bands get called out for making like a radio friendly album, and by radio friendly they mean like it's got good catchy songs.
But it's
like,
got good songs.
Isn't that the full point of like some of these bigger bands that are like trying to get radio plays to make albums that get radio plays
and that sound good on radio? And you know, this full thing of it being, you know, feel good, well written, well produced, sounds good in big arenas. You know, there's a reason why this is like a trope that happens in music when bands get big, because, you know, if you're not well versed in this, there's a lot of bands like Def Leppard and a lot of the 80s bands that start off being quite fast and heavy sounding, and they get into these stadiums and people say to them, look, you know, if you're shredding at 1,000,000 miles an hour, it's just like the audience just gets a blare when they're at the back of the stadium in comparison. So it turns into this, well, how do we write music that sounds good in big rooms? Well, yeah, in big rooms, you've got space to use, and, you know, you need to maybe slow things down and make things more, you know, tailored to the environment. It's like, say, you know, if you're just doing like a melody that's coming at you at like 100 miles an hour, like 16th notes, in a big venue, it can turn to sludge. It doesn't always turn to sludge, but it definitely can.
And also, it's like a lot of these sort of songs, they utilize the crowd. So it's like Whatever It Takes and stuff. The choruses are, I don't want to say they're designed to be sung in an arena, but you would imagine, and a lot of bands do this when they start to get to the size of, say, Imagine Dragons was after Smoke and Mirrors. They sort of go, we need songs that work in an arena because that's all we're playing. We was lucky enough to see Imagine Dragons on the Evolve tour, but it was like the second half of the Evolve tour when we saw them, because there was teasing songs, or they at least had one song from
Origins. I don't think they did.
Did you not think? Am I thinking that? Am I placing it in the wrong place then?
I think we was on the early side.
We saw it on the early leg, and then they announced they started to mash up the songs after.
Yeah,
that makes sense, because they did play a lot of Evolve, didn't they? They played like almost every song. Yeah. I think the only songs they didn't play was Rise Up and Yesterday.
No, they did play Rise Up.
Did they?
I'd have to look at set list.
No, I know. I'd have to.
I'm not sure now.
It's so hard to think of every detail. Yeah. I'm sure they didn't play Rise Up though, because I remember thinking that they played all the other songs, because they did play Start Over and they played I'll Make It Up. Yeah, Mouth of the River, I'll Make It Up to You. They played all them, but they didn't play.
And the first track, what's the first track called?
The intro track.
God, that's one of my favourites as well. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not going to try and think because it'll throw me off. But like I say, we're not talking about Evolve. We're talking about Eyes Closed specifically. And what I think is really nice about Imagine Dragons is they've actually put out a lot of music recently. Even though there seems to be, particularly in the UK, there seems to feel like radio silence from Imagine Dragons because they're not being sort of picked up on any radio stations or anything. They have put out Mercury Act 1 and 2, which is a lot of songs, for anybody who's missed that, you know. But I really enjoyed Mercury Act 1 and 2, and this sort of feels like a continuation of that sort of sound.
Well, they seem to be using the same fonts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I suppose.
For Eyes Closed, it's the same fonts. It's a very similar artwork style. And it makes me wonder what this project... It'd be really funny if it was Mercury Act 3. And it was like, here's a 3 CD case. He was like, guys...
Oh, now that's where it would get awful, isn't it? If you bought it and it had the first two and the third one in, like the second one did. You're looking at your first edition one, like, what's the point of buying this? But very few bands tend to go down that route where they actually do like 3. It's like even with Coldplay, Music of the Spheres Volume 1, Moon Music is being teased at the moment, but they're not gone for like the sort of Mercury Act 1 and Act 2. And the best thing, the most respectful thing with Mercury Act 1 and Act 2 is the speed of which Act 2 came out. It actually made it feel like there was a pair of albums that was meant to go together. It'd be very interesting if they did like Mercury Act 3 and 4.
God forbid. They might call it like a different thing, not Mercury, but not Pluto, but maybe something, I don't know, Mars.
Yeah, well, you know,
I don't know.
It's always tough when you have that themed album rollout, because it's like you can get into like, say, Def Leppard obviously having like Hysteria, Adrenalize, Euphoria, all like one word, big words, you know, and there's sort of like a trilogy in the way the art looks and everything. And then you have bands like Asia, obviously, who have like Asia, Astra, Aqua, you know, and it just keeps going, or as many words as you can think of.
Beginning with A specifically.
And then they just completely throw that out the window when they reform and do the last 5 albums they do. They're just like, we're not doing that anymore. So, yeah, it's interesting when they go for like a series of album names, because how far do you take it?
Yeah, and it can start out really cool and creative, and it can soon be like a massive limiting factor as well, can't it? Like you can feel boxed in to an idea when you're doing that. I imagine a lot of the reason why people don't like to do double albums is because you start to be boxed in that sense. Because the problem with a double album is the album's got to have some sort of continuity, even if it's just the mix master. And that's what trips you up when you're doing 30 songs.
Yeah, you'd have to have like a similar process, or even if you didn't have a similar process, you have to make sure when you listen to them back to back, either on Spotify or on a CD or whatever, it sounds like a cohesive project of work. You can't have like it's so funny, because if you get most bands' greatest hits, right, and you actually start like shuffling the first album songs versus the latest album songs, even like The Killers, right, it's very hard to listen to that album as one body of work, you know, like direct hits, because the start is so different from the end. It's like it almost sounds like a different band, and that's your sort of problem when you're having 30 songs. If you do it at different studios, and you're like, we're doing a real rocky one, then we're doing a real hip-hop one, and this one's got loud drums, this one's got quiet drums, a lot of the time it can start to sound like completely different projects when you're listening to it on that level. I mean, a lot of people don't listen to it on that level though.
I suppose if you're leaning into being genreless and having a lot of experimentation, it's easier to make a lot of songs in one go for like one project. It's when you've got like a large selection of the songs have a sound, and then you have these songs that don't have that sound, and that's when it starts to feel more obvious, I think.
I suppose this is what we're talking about, to go back to Evolve. Now, if Evolve had 20 songs on, 7 of them was like I'll Make It Up to You and Rise Up, 5 of them was like Yesterday, and then you had another 3 songs that sounded like Thunder and Believer.
And then 5 more.
Yeah, and then 5 more that just continue, you know, going off in different directions, maybe they're a ballad or whatever. Then the songs that don't fit in as much sonically, like we say, like Yesterday, they would fit in a little bit more, because you wouldn't feel like they're just going out on a limb by themselves. You know, that's the thing. And what I really like about double albums and like just releasing a large quantity of music is, even if it is still like, you know, trimmed down from the original demos, it does feel like as a fan you get more bang for buck. I mean, there's nothing worse than a band saying, here's 9 new songs and we're going away for like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
You know.
But also, like, we often say to people, when people are like, why don't they just like trim this happens a lot in regards to the 1975 with albums like Notes on Conditional Form. People are like, can't we just like trim it down a bit? And I'm like, yeah, but what if they trim the songs you like off it? And that's always the argument. Like with Mercury Acts 1 and 2, they could have just put out an album called Mercury, but if you're a fan of Imagine Dragons and you like, say, 10 of them songs more than the other 10, they might have just wiped the 10 you like off that album and said, we're doing something different. And that's why I think the more songs argument is always better, especially in streaming culture. I mean, hell, now you can just make a playlist of the 10 best songs.
Yeah, and just cut it out completely. You don't even have to listen to it.
You are in control, whereas on a CD you can't do that. So if you're like a more of a digital listener, you can just make the 10-song album you want to hear, and you have the freedom of choice. Whereas if they make that decision for you, you have no choice, and you are stuck with the songs they give you.
Yeah, and that's also what's really nice about when they put the companion album to Evolve that came out.
Origins,
there we go. What was nice when they put Origins out is you got to hear these songs that I'm assuming never made the cut for Evolve, or that came up very quickly after.
I would
Evolve.
assume that they had more songs and they split them off into 2 projects. Yeah. I mean, he just said in an interview recently that supposedly he writes a song every day, and he has done since he was like, 12 or 15 or something.
Yeah.
So I imagine they're overflowing with material. It's just whatever they want to put out. And, writing a song isn't necessarily writing demons every day. It can be writing like a sketch of an idea and not an absolute masterpiece, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because a lot of songs start out as like a little strum on an acoustic guitar and a little vocal melody, or maybe even like two lines of a song. And then even if you have like the full set of lyrics and the full set of chords, it's really like the full sort of production element that takes time, isn't it? It's having to go to the studios, get everybody to play it, record it properly, mix it properly, master it, and then sort of send it out. The marketing goes into a lot of it for these bands as well. It's a big effort to put out. Like, I'd love to see a band as big as Imagine Dragons literally put out a song a day. Like, it would be insane if somebody could keep it up.
The logistics of it. I mean, Taylor Swift is the closest probably in terms of releases per day. But again, it's such a logistical challenge. And, we speculate that she's got like 6 different teams making each of her individual re-release albums. So she's probably sat there and sung as much as she possibly can in the best part of like a year, and everybody else is just finishing them all round the clock while she's on tour.
And obviously, the way albums are made, particularly at the moment, and also, like, I don't want to be a downer, but COVID sort of screwed a lot of people over for this, and you're still seeing albums that was recorded in COVID being released now. Like Beyonce said that Cowboy Carter was meant to come out before Renaissance, but because she wanted to put out a party album and everybody was stuck inside, she just waited. And it's insane to me. Like, if you say this album's 3 or 4 years old and it hasn't come out, you go, that is really weird. But I also think that must have been awful for the people who collaborated on that album and had to just wait.
Oh, keep it a secret. I'm on Beyonce's new album. It's like, I can't tell anyone.
But, as from a fan perspective, you only see what is there. A lot of bands don't. I mean, some bands do tease like vault tracks and stuff, but it's very hard to really know what a band is working on at any given time and how many things are in the pipeline. There's so many like interviews where they just drop a hint and they go, like Shinedown said after Amaryllis, they said, oh yeah, the next album's already done, we've made it. Did that album ever come out?
Definitely not,
because it was like a 2 or 3 year gap, and then you felt like there was on something completely different, and you go, is that the album that went with Amaryllis, or is that album just shelved for a deluxe edition?
I personally thought at the time that album was just put on a shelf and when maybe later people get it. But it's hard because I suppose if you do that, and Coldplay is a great example of this, their songs have long lineages of supposing to be on a different album entirely, and then they don't finish it in time, or they finish it too early, like Sky Full of Stars, and it ends up on the wrong album. And, it doesn't really matter what album they end up on, but from a creative standpoint, the idea that all these songs have got specific places that they're going to go to, and they all end up going to the wrong albums, or a lot of them end up going to the wrong albums, is such a funny idea to me. And then it makes you think, well, what would like that song sound like? What would some of these songs sound like if they was on the albums they was supposed to be on?
Yeah, because a lot of the time they'll like completely redress the songs and re-record them, so it's like there'll be a completely different idea. Like some of the songs by Coldplay, you'll have like a pre-Milo version of the song, and then you'll have the this is what we did when we actually got round to it 7 years later.
Yeah. But I really, really wish, and the 1975 were bad for that as well. I think a lot of people do that because naturally that's the process of creation. It's making a song and saying, I suppose if all you did all day was make songs and that was your income, you could be like, right, well, we've done this song like this, let's try it like this and like this. I think John Mayer said that, they often do each song like 3 to 5 times, and then they're like in different styles, and then they're like, this is the style we want to do this album in or this song in, and you're like, that seems like so much work. But I get it because it's all about practice and about just because you have an initial thought of how a song should sound doesn't mean that that's the right arrangement. Or say if you're somebody like John Mayer and the people in your band aren't necessarily fixed, you could be like, well, we haven't got the right players on this particular song and stuff like that. But yeah, I wish that people put these songs out, because I don't want to be sat there in like 2040 when they decide they want to put the rest of Milo out by Coldplay and be like, why can't you just give us it now?
Yeah, it's a bit like what's happening with Random Access Memories, isn't it? When though they don't have much material, they're still trying to put whatever they can out, whatever scraps of studio sessions they have. And as a fan, the songs you kind of listen and go, yeah, I mean, it's great, but it's clearly not a single.
Everybody thought they had more for Random Access Memories. I definitely did. I was convinced that there was this electronic album that was the pre-album that they then shifted to the live instrumentation for, but apparently I was wrong as well.
They just didn't seem to have a lot, and like to come out with that deluxe version and have like one extra song on the end. Oh, well, they had a deluxe Japanese bonus track on, didn't they, that we hadn't heard or whatever, but there wasn't a lot. So what's very exciting about bands like Imagine Dragons is you imagine that there is hundreds of songs that they can pull from, a bit like what they can do with Prince. But then again, if you're a Prince fan, you're like, oh, I know he put a lot out, but you could have just put it out when he made it. Well, particularly like Welcome to America, where it's done and dusted.
It's like having to wait between 20 and 40 years to hear an album. It's like, look, just put it out. If it's done, especially in the age of streaming, if it's done, put it out. Hell, just put it out on your website.
I was going to say they should just have like a Vault access. There is a streaming service that's coming up called Vault that's meant to be a Patreon for Vault and studio scraps, basically. But what I was going to say is you've got an audience there to monetize. Like if I was Imagine Dragons, I'd just say join Imagine Dragons VIP or whatever, and then you just get access to like a bunch of like studio files that you either have demos of songs that have already come out, or you have like a teaser snippets or whatever. You could do that, but there's like, if the song's not going to make it because they've all said like at the label, yeah, we don't like this one, I feel like a lot of bands should just like sneak it out or leak it. Even if it's like on a leaked capacity, where they're like, for those who want it, here's like a cheeky Dropbox link or whatever. That's what I really like about how Charlie XCX and stuff do stems, because they'll just be like on their Instagram stories, stems, if anybody wants them. With no purpose or no like motive, it's just like, download them whilst you can. It's almost like a secret.
I see that a lot on Instagram, and I've nabbed a couple of like stems or acapellas through that, where people just they just drop them on their Instagram story. It's only there for like a day. And you're like, holy crap, that's stems for a full song.
Yeah. But another thing about Eyes Closed is the video's great. He's trapped in a maze, he's angry about it. Dan Reynolds doing his thing without his shirt buttoned up. So that's his full MO at the moment.
That's grand.
But keen observers will note that Daniel Platzman is not in the video. We can only assume that he's playing drums on the song. Who knows? But Daniel Reynolds obviously plays drums as well, so maybe he's taken up drum duties for a single or two. We don't know what's going on with Daniel Platzman, but hopefully he joins. Yeah, I
think,
enjoy his Platz beats on Instagram and stuff.
The thing that's frustrating for a lot of the fans is that nobody has said what's happening with Platz. Nobody has said if he's coming back, if he's on a break, if he's been kicked out altogether. Nobody has actually made an official statement on either side. But when they're putting out like the good to be back and there's a picture of three of them, you're like, is he coming back?
It's the same as the Killers, where you see we're back and you see one of them's missing. You go, why is one of them missing? Why is it a different three people? The Killers are terrible for it because it's always a different three people. And you're like, do the bassist and guitarist hate each other? We have no idea. Do they just not all get together at the same time? It must be frustrating for the Killers at the same time.
But I'd like to imagine that maybe they've gone for a Killers approach and they've said, look, Platz can't be bothered for like a tour or whatever. You see, like you say, we might look and he might have played drums on the full album. He'd be like, I'm not doing press, I'm not doing the tour.
Not doing the videos.
But he might be semi in the band on the records. And that would be nice to know, because I think for a lot of people, band lineups, like, it's hard because if you lose too many people, it's not necessarily a death sentence, but if you've got your original lineup, people are like, just try and keep it. Keep it.
What a lot of people who like bands are afraid of is it being like the Daniel Reynolds show with a rotating band called Imagine Dragons, because that happens to so many bands over time. And I think there's just a really nice charm with bands that keep the lineup, because you feel like, one, they actually like get on with each other, and two, I think for a continuity point of view, it just makes it feel like an actual band. It's so hard, even if you lose just the drummer, that then the drummer's never there. And this is sort of the problem a lot of bands have, where they lose one member like midway in, and then you just go, like you say, for the press photos, they don't seem to integrate a new band member at the moment. They just seem to say, oh, we've lost the drummer, so the drummer's never in promo, he's never in interviews, it's just a session drummer or whatever, or a stand-in drummer. Foo Fighters is the only band that I can even think about where they get a keyboardist in and they go, Rami, you're on all press, you're in the movie, you're doing everything.
But it took a long time for Rami to get added to Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
It took him a really long time because he was a session player, I think, for multiple projects and tours before actually being officially integrated in. Another band, though, that has successfully swapped their members out is Boys Like Girls. They're one of the only bands I can think of that have really said, like, this is Boys Like Girls, but it's like two of them are different people, which I didn't, because I'm not super old school fan of Boys Like Girls. Don't you think
that's easier for them to do, though, after a 10-year break?
After a 10-year break,
because you can suspend your disbelief and go, they look different to how I remember.
Well, again, it's like with Imagine Dragons, it's assuming people care. Now, if I was Platz, I would be like, there's a lot. I mean, I looked at the Instagram comments. There was a insane amount of people demanding to know where Platz is. I mean, there has been, because he's been missing on a lot of the tours, the recent tour. That is a really, really strong reception. And I think when people care that much, and a lot of these pop bands, people aren't bothered really who's playing what. But you can see that the fans are so passionate about where's Platz. And I mean, somebody said, no Platz, no Imagine Dragons. And I thought it was really funny because I was like, I wouldn't go that far. But we want to see him in there. You want to see Platz in the band. You want to see them all having fun. I think somebody owes it to all the fans to at least tell people what's going on. Whether it's a bit like breakup with Platz or like he's just chilling.
We bought Killers tickets and they said everybody's back, and then when we actually saw them, there was like, okay, joke's on you, it's only two of them. And you was like, you can't sell the tickets under the guise that it's for original members and then just say, psych, two of them aren't there.
Psych, you got no guitar player or bass player.
So many times they've done it so many times, and you almost respect the hustle that they're just like, you won't notice.
A lot. I mean, there will be a good chunk of people who don't notice, and that's what they're trying to do. They're just trying to say people will stop asking, and most people, your average not fan, ain't going to notice that either people have been swapped or that people are missing. But I think, like you say, it's justice for the fans, the people who've been there since day one or day, even just the most recent project, where they want to know where these people are. Because I suppose the bands at this point, it's just more in a way, it's more personalities and characters to be invested in. And we was talking the other day about how people are missing a trick with bands, you know, because it's a lot easier to market 4 people at you than it is to market 1, because you might, you know, some people will always connect with instrument players over the singer, because some people are funny with vocals and vocalists. Don't know why.
We was kind of saying, like, what K-pop has really got right is they're just like, put 9 of them in, put 30 of them in. As long as you like one of them, you'll be a fan of the band. And that's sort of what the bands are missing a trick with, particularly in England and America. You have a lot of solo artists, and if you don't like the singer, you don't like any of it. Whereas bands like the Killers, you might really like Ronnie as a drummer.
Yeah.
And that might be the reason you want to go see him, you know.
Yeah.
They've even talked about this, like how Ronnie carried the band in the first 2 albums, you're like, on tour, because he was a showman and the rest of the band wasn't as comfortable. They'd not found their feet live yet. And Ronnie was the reason people, even like they said, like even like Oasis or whatever, would go, they'd walk straight past Brandon Flowers and shake Ronnie's hand because they just was impressed with Ronnie, you know. That's what you get with a band dynamic. You get a multiple angles to look at the band from, whereas I do feel like the solo artist culture is great for the solo artists, but you're either in or you're out. There's nothing to like look at other than the one person.
Yeah. So, justice for Platz. No, I see people saying justice for Platz. I hope we get a statement about what the hell's happening with Daniel Platzman, and I cannot wait to hear more music from Imagine Dragons. I am also a massive, massive fan. And I just think I'd rather get something than nothing. And if you're one of the people demanding to know where Platz is, appreciate that you're going to get music at all. Because Imagine Dragons may just disappear one day and you'll be annoyed even more so.
I always think, like, you could, you know, any band you listen to could have followed the trajectory of fun and never come back. So always appreciate the fact that they did another album, or every album that comes out is an album that you get extra, you know, from your favourite album. That's always the thing. But yeah, we always want more because we love music. We want as many albums by as many bands we like as possible. And on that note, tell us what your favourite bands are in the Q&As and that. And we're going to put in the polls on Spotify. Do you want more or less? See you next week, everybody.